Thanks a lot for being here, for having the opportunity, sharing a bit what happened in my life. And I will guide you a bit through quite intense moments, because I think life is the quality of how intense you can live your life. And as Kurt Cobain said, please entertain me. So when I was very young, with 15 years old, I loved to entertain people. I made events, I made shows, gradually became bigger and bigger. Later on in Zurich, when early 90s, everything was quite closed. I flew to New York, I flew to London to bring all those artists, the musicians, the bands, the DJs to Zurich, opened a club, used to run restaurants and bars. It was quite a high time, much fun, because I really loved pulling the strings, bring people on stage, organizing huge events, 300, 500. At the end, the biggest event I was part of was about 50,000 people for an open-air festival. So I really love this. I love to be in power, I love to rock the stages, and I love to be so close to people to help them to be on stage. What I learned in those days is all of these people on stage have an incredible energy. They have incredible power, incredible passion. They are born for stages. As soon as someone is on stage, you really feel it if he or she has the authenticity to really bring, to inspire, to rock, whatever sense you mean. So these were the high times. Mostly of the time, of the weekends, I started Thursday, Friday nighting, running my clubs. Sometimes Sunday morning, early, 3 o'clock, I took my rolls, drove to Cannes, had a few great days, came back next Wednesday. So these were early 80s, close to the millions. Then we did techno events. We went to Moscow. We were talking with the mayor of Moscow, bringing the street parade, those days, a love parade to Moscow. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. There was quite complex constellation of who wants to have the money from whom. And so it went on, and over the years, I worked in 72 countries and made events. And what I learned was there, sometimes you arrive at the place, you think you are clear, you're very well prepared, but then life happens. There are different cultures, especially in Africa, especially in Asia. When you come as a little Swiss guy and you have your idea you want to bring, you want to realize your dreams, and then you have your plans, and then what happens comes on stage is really defined in a together. It's on the we base. There are the locals who have their knowledge, there are we with our ideas, and we have to merge this. In the event business, it's a zero-fault business, because if you're on stage, you can't change something. It's a momentum, it's an energy which goes through the audience, which is not the same in movie. Movie, you can cut it, but it's real life, so the show has to be sharp at 8 o'clock. So in that high pressure environment, I learned so much to give, and I really love to empower people on stage, and I dedicated all my life to really create great momentum, great environments. In those days, my balance was I did sport. I wake up in the morning, I did some sports, I was quite fit. Probably we would say I wasn't healthy, but I was quite fit. And so I did everything. In every city I had my bicycles. Even in New York I had my bike stored. So as soon as I went to New York, I took my bike and drove through the city, because that was my level of energy. So I could feel the city. I see all the nuances and then bring it back, curate it differently, adapt it to the European environment. So I always had some little pressure on my chest. But I didn't take it serious, because if you do sports, you know how to go through pain. And so one day, it was an intensive period in my life. I was biking up a hill, going to meet a client, and it was a great sunny day. I just went up. I thought I was very fit. And the next I remember is laying on a bed in an emergency room. So this was this same light, this bright light. So all of a sudden, all the sun had gone. I was in the emergency room, and this really horrible scenario, because you're bound to the bed. I was full of all the medicine they gave me. I couldn't think clearly. And in the emergency area is quite noisy, because you have these 8 curtains around you, this bright light, and the radio is always on. So you hear what's happening in the city. You hear all the pain of all those who are in a similar situations they bring up to the emergency. So I was laying there, really aware that I don't have any power. I was used to be smart, I was used to be fit, but I was totally depending on others. This was quite a tough experience. So for 4 days, I was laying there in the hospital. My father came up because he wasn't sure if I can make it. And this step by step helped me realizing what I'm doing. But I was totally blocked with myself. So I was awake all the days and all the nights, or I thought at least. And one night, around 3 o'clock, a night nurse joined me, came to me, did some applications, and then she told me, hey, listen to your heart. Listen to my heart? What does she mean? But I didn't take it seriously, and she left, and interestingly enough, it started to nagging on me when I went home. So I left the hospital, I had no energy, I was out of my power, I couldn't go back to my business, I was at home. In those days I lived in the old part of the city, I had an apartment, had a little balcony, but I was totally blocked and isolated at my space. My whole world fell apart. So the person who was always on stage or loved to be on stage, supporting everyone to come on stage, I was totally blocked. I couldn't do anything. This was a quite tough experience. Even a phone call stressed me. And all those friends, or those thought friends, I couldn't engage them with anymore. So the more and more my circle of friends or colleagues reduced. And sometimes in that moment where you're totally lost, someone really knocks at your door or rings. In my case, it was a caterer. I used to dine around in all over the city with all those chefs, and one of them realized for 3 weeks I didn't show up. So one day he came to my door and rang and asked, how are you? And he has seen me, my devastated conditions, and he started to bring me food. So every day, around 6 o'clock, someone was ringing and brought me food. So this was for at least 2 or 3 months. And I tried to go back to my power, to my body, but my body was powerless. And a friend joined me and told me, hey, go to a monastery. Me going to a monastery, the contradiction of intensity. So I trusted him, and I went for a 10-day retreat in silence in the French part of Switzerland. I arrived there, I remember quite well, it was November, it was quite foggy, and probably the whole environment there, the whole landscape mirrored my situation in my soul. Everything was quite foggy, everything was quite blurred, and I went to this monastery. Then you have your room where everything is quite reduced, but very selected. Everything what is in a monastery, there had been much thought about what is the material. I started up at morning 5 o'clock, did my yoga, did our meditation, or at least in those days I tried to. And the first 3-4 days were very tough because you lay there embedded in this environment and you walk around, but I wasn't in my soul, I wasn't in my heart, I just was like walking through, but no connection to myself. And every day, all the past, all the burden, all what I had in my soul, which wasn't cleared out, came up and opened up. I couldn't handle it, I couldn't even park it, it totally took over my emotions. So the first 3 or 4 nights were quite intense, quite horrifying. Step by step, if you start to work with your body, if you do yoga or whatever you do, your body helps you to root yourself. It was different than I did before I did intense sport. With yoga or Tai Chi or other Asian techniques, you find more a balanced way, finding approach, having a new awareness to your body. And I started to loving this. So after the 5th, 6th day, I really felt better. I really felt at ease. I wasn't back to my power, I used to, but I felt very supported, very cocooned, there was a very helpful environment caring about my soul. Everything was done there was really about care. And I took this, and after 10 days, I left the monastery, and I was at ease with myself. I feel quite protected in this little cloud of feeling well and fine. Unfortunately, the night when I came back, I used to make an event. So I came from the silence, from the stillness, from the solitude, back to the stage, and I couldn't handle it. Me, who loved always to engage with people, I couldn't stand people. So it was a very shocking experience. So I found myself a little, rerouted myself, and then I went back on stage, and I couldn't stand it. So I went back to my house, and I stayed there for another time, and it took me so long to combine both worlds. So this stillness, this solitude, this focusing on your own, this new level of awareness, but how could I combine this with my old knowledge, with my knowledge to support people, to my dedication to bring out the best in people on stage. And suddenly, with meditation and with yoga, and I did a yoga teacher education, a new world opened up. Sometimes in life, and everything seems blocked. Nothing works. And I was used to train with my mind. My mind always told me what to do. The mind is a very great counselor, but it's not the captain. And with having new access to new spaces through meditation, and with my new alignment and new awareness with my body, other spaces opened up in my soul. And it dawned to me that I could combine this, having seen the intensity, and now there's a more stillness, a more rootedness, a more connectivity. And if you talk about your heart, there's a deeper knowledge in our heart. As Blaise Pascal told, the heart has its reasons, which the reasons can't even find. So it means we have a deeper connectiveness, a deeper understanding of where we do come from and what we do. And the more and more you trust to start this feeling, the more and more the world opens up. But the mind is first very rebellious. The mind fights against it because it loses the dominance. The mind's always, and can be very helpful for our mind because it protects us from many things. On the other side, if the mind is too strong, there is a big danger that we just live this small, tiny, perfect, organized life in security. If we can connect it with our heart, with our soul, if we can combine it, if it's a dance between the mind and the soul and the heart, a totally other world opens up. A world where there's much more vitality. It's not power, it's more connecting to the force, to the inner force of the universe. And listening to that is an incredible challenge because in this over-speeded world, it's a challenge to reroute ourselves, to find our base, to come into our balance. So I can really invite you every day, take out a few minutes, try to relax and find your space. And how can you do this? So I would like you to make a little experiment with me, a little exercise. So bring your hands to your chest. Close your eyes. And just inhale and exhale. And now just imagine that you are protected, that there is a very safe environment. Whatever you do, you're secure. So in that environment, what would you do? Who would you like to meet? Who would you like to be with? What would you do in the world? Where would you like to travel? What's the contribution to the world? And slowly come back, and hopefully a few of you just had a feeling, just have seen pictures, images, what they could be. And that is the connection to our heart. Sometimes this little distance of 30, 20 centimeters from our mind to our heart is the longest distance we have to go to find what we want to do. So I really invite you to step back, find a different perspective, become an observer of yourself, that we are driven by our emotions of fear, anxiety, and sorrows, and reroute ourselves to our heart level, to these enormous spaces, this enormous wisdom. The mind has knowledge, and the heart has wisdom. And please find your stage where you bring your soul on stage in a very safe and protected environment through more conscious life. Thank you.